Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is Monday morning, 5:30 here in Calgary, Alberta, March 15th, and I'm happy to be here. I'm just waking up and having some coffee. And it's bright and early, and with the time change and everything, it feels like 4:30 to me, but that's okay. Yeah, that's all right. It's great to be up and able to bring some information to you. We're on for about 15 minutes. This is one child abuse survivor to another, and we were looking last week at an article on understanding crisis that I found on Child Welfare Information Gateway, and that's at www.childwelfare.gov. And it's a good article about understanding crisis, and especially when there's an issue in the family, and there's abuse going on and there's an actual intervention by CPS and stuff. There's a lot of information here regarding that and what they do, the crisis workers, how they kind of work with families to help them learn how to cope, and help them to learn how to problem solve on their own, so that when anything else comes up in the future, they'll know how to deal with it and stuff. And I think it's just so important to look at that. So many people have gone through this, and I know myself, even our family went through that. And, we didn't get the help that we needed, and so we spiraled downwards really over a period of years, and it just got worse. It went from bad to worse. And, I think had my parents really realized that they did need help, and instead of trying to do it all on their own, a lot of the problems that we had in our family wouldn't have been so hard on them, and in turn so hard on us. So I think this article is very important for people. I know it is for me. I'm actually learning quite a bit from it, and seeing a lot of the stuff that went on in my family. When I'm reading through this article, I can see what happened and what should have happened. You know what I mean? So it's so important to keep our families, together and safe. And it's bad, and bad things happen to families all the time. So that's why I think it's just important to understand what crisis is in people's lives and how we can actually work to get through the crisis. And then, when another, situation comes up that presents itself as a crisis again, we'll have a better set of tools and, sort of problem-solving skills to work through these crises. So I think it's so important. And we were going over this last week in the mornings. And so, it's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or therapist certificates. And I'm just a person who sits on Blog Talk Radio. I pay to do my own show just to bring information to people. So it's not to replace professional therapy or professional help. And I just want to bring information to people that I find is helpful for me in my walk, and also first my study in human rights, child rights, which I plan to continue doing. I just, I ran out of funds. I lost my job and couldn't continue going to school at that point, so I had to sort of take a break. And I needed to take a break anyway because I was getting a little bit tired of my last course. My grades just weren't as good as they could have been. So I passed it and everything, but I wasn't happy about it. So with the work that I had done, so I thought, I can do a better job than that. So I decided to take a break, and that's what happened. I just decided to start doing Blog Talk Radio in the meantime. And I plan on going back to school hopefully this year. I'd like to start again in the summer or fall and continue on with child rights and human rights, that type of thing. And so, it's so important to understand this stuff, because if you grew up in a home that was full of crisis and full of all kinds of abuse and problems, then you would know what a crisis is. And our family was in a continual crisis. So our parents couldn't cope, and they didn't know how to problem solve, and they wouldn't work together as a team to try to get things solved. And so, they turned on each other, they turned on the kids turned on them and on each other, and it was just ridiculous. And it's hard to watch the family go down like that. And so that's why I think it's just so important that everybody get help before it gets like that. And you see in the paper, it's happening all the time. So if you're, if this subject or, topics of abuse bother you, please turn the show off. Listen at your own discretion, please. And, it's not, you wouldn't be hurting my feelings at all. We have to know what's good for us to listen to. And we know where we're at, in our healing, and what we can hear and what we can't. So that's why I just suggest that, if it's a topic that's going to make you uncomfortable, please turn the show off and listen at your own discretion. And if you're a young person, make sure you get someone to listen to this with you, because there's so many issues with online safety, and I'm a promoter of child rights and a promoter of online safety for children, especially for real youngsters, and because I know there's a lot of crazy people out there trying to do very crazy things to people. And I grew up in a home where my parents weren't watching what I was doing most of the time, and we had a computer in the home. I can imagine my parents wouldn't have cared what I was doing. So I just think it's really important that you get someone that you can listen to the show with you, like a teacher, counselor, a good neighbors, parents, or people you trust, maybe a mentor, to listen to it with you, and that way they can help you. Because I'm not sure where the players are now. I just don't know who's listening anymore. So that's the thing. It's very important to keep yourself safe. I just can't stress that enough. So we're going to continue on with this article, Understanding Crisis, and we left off with the psychological effects of crisis. So last Friday. We looked at Friday morning, disorganized thinking, preoccupation with insignificant activities, and expression of hostile and emotional distancing, and impulsiveness. Now we're going to look at dependence, threat to identity, and stuff, and then we're going to keep on going here. So I'll just read right from the page. That's www.childwelfare.gov, and you can pull up this article if you want to read along with me here. Dependence on the crisis worker at a time of crisis is a natural response and may be necessary before an individual can resume independence. In cases of child abuse and neglect, protection of the children may require the crisis worker to do for the parents what most other parents do for themselves. For example, the crisis worker may need to call a creditor or a utility company or help parents in structuring the basis of child care. During a crisis, perceptions of the crisis worker's power or authority can have a stabilizing impact on a family. A family in crisis is likely to welcome an objective, skillful, and kind authority who knows how to get things done. Offers of help from a concerned, competent crisis worker seem the answer to all the family's difficulties. After a brief period of dependency, most families are able to resume independent functioning. For some families in crisis, however, dependency may linger. They need to have someone else in charge, making these families particularly susceptible to influence from others, rendering them more vulnerable in their need to find solutions. They may not be able to discriminate what is beneficial for them and what could be harmful, or in the absence of a competent crisis worker, to whom should they listen, right? And so that's important, it's kind of crazy. Like my parents, they really could have used a hand, and there's no way they would have got it. I mean, they were not open to help. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I think they just had such hard lives themselves when they grew up, and I think that they didn't want people stepping in telling them how to live their lives. But then again, they should have, because they could see their family was spiraling downwards, but they wouldn't do anything about it. And that's kind of what makes me angry is, things happen in families and bad things happen in families all the time. But when the parents, when the people, in charge, the caregivers and the parents take responsibility for that and say, look, we're having problems, man. We got to get this fixed because we love our children and we don't want our family to be destroyed. That to me is way better than just trying to be, the type to sit around and say, well, we don't want any help. We can do this ourselves. But then in the meantime, they're crying out for help. You know what I mean? So in other words, they're just talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. You know what I mean? Because my parents were always saying, well, if somebody would just help us, or you know what I mean? They were always acting like they were not, that there wasn't any help available. And there was help available, but they wouldn't reach out for it. And I don't know what that was all about. You know what I mean? I'd have to sit and study it, but it is kind of crazy. Threat to identity. Identity is both an inner condition and an interactional process. When an event, such as a child abuse report, threatens one's self-concept in family relationships, a crisis occurs because usual coping methods fail. One's sense of personal identity is impaired, causing disequilibrium. One's previous feelings of competency and worth may seem totally lost. To counter a lowered self-perception, a parent in crisis may assume a facade of adequacy or arrogance, claiming that no help is needed. Oh, maybe this is what was going on with my parents. Or the parent may withdraw from others for help. In either case, it is important to remember that the parent in crisis is probably very frightened, rather than resistant or unmotivated. The worker has the opportunity to establish rapport by recognizing strengths that help to restore a sense of goodness or individual worth. The crisis worker cannot accept abuse of a child, but does acknowledge the parents' and family's strengths. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Summary: during a state of crisis, individuals and families are usually quite receptive to intervention. The anxiety produced by the crisis, coupled with the realization that past coping and problem-solving strategies are not working, spurs motivation to learn new strategies. If help is not available during this critical period of openness to change, the individual and family may become totally immobilized or resort to destructive or maladaptive behaviors. Therefore, it is critical that CPS caseworkers quickly identify crisis situations. In identifying a crisis situation, it is important to consider its contributing elements, like what specific situations or events are creating the most stress for the family, for the individual and the family. What difficulties in coping are evident? At what point in time is intervention occurring? And the phase of the crisis must also be considered. Feelings and behaviors that on the surface appear bizarre may be in fact characteristic of the crisis phase. Correct interpretation of the crisis phase is essential to appropriate intervention. For instance, clients whose crises are chronic or multiple may require referrals to follow-up clinicians who can further address underlying issues. Finally, it is important to be aware of the feelings people typically experience during a state of crisis. A crisis can have a devastating impact on one's senses and psychological functioning. However, that impact is often short-lived when interpreted and dealt with correctly, they said. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like, if they can catch people, if they can get to people in time, and identify a crisis properly, whether it's, something that's, acute, like it's just for a short term, or if it's something that's chronic and it's just something that's going to keep going on. If they actually, these crisis workers determine this, and get the right determination, they can really help the family out. So I can imagine, that's the way it would be, right? And so that, it's quite interesting, I think, looking at all this. It certainly is for me, because I know there was an intervention done. The social workers were involved, and my mom said that when they went to court, because my brother had gone to school in a turtleneck, and he had been beaten and he was bruised, and his teacher noticed. His teacher took him to the nurse, and then my brother told the nurse that he was afraid to go home. And so they got the social services and everything in on it, and my parents had to go to court, and they were told that we were going to be removed from the home, and my mom was like begging and pleading, please don't take my children, this is all I have, our marriage isn't the greatest, but I don't want to lose my children, right? So in the meantime, she was like blaming my dad for the whole thing, right? And because of course my dad was the one who had beaten up my brother. And she was really just as abusive as herself, right? But she was not willing to take the responsibility for it. And so here she is claiming that she loves her children, and the whole thing was just a mess, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy, like what happened there. They just snowballed the child welfare system. They were pretty good at snowballing a lot of people. You know what I mean? Because they had people feeling sorry for them. My mom would be like, well, it's all his fault. It's all your father's fault. But actually, she was very abusive herself. They were really good at being manipulative. And that's the problem with most people who are abusers. They can get away with it because they know how to manipulate the system. They know how to manipulate people. And they know how to manipulate the right people to get what they need and what they want. And that's the problem with abuse, And also, so many times it's just silenced and hushed up. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm so happy to stand with them. We've got about a minute left, and their website is awesome, and you can get all kinds of great information on there regarding like signs and symptoms, and as well reporting child abuse, which is so important. If you suspect that a child is being abused, you have to do the right thing and make the phone call. Don't sit there and think, oh, I don't want to break up their family. What if they're what if the child's not being abused, and what if it's just if I'm just thinking that? Well, you could save a child's life, because if the child is being abused, then and you don't report it, that child could be killed and murdered at the hands of their parents, and if not, they're going to live a whole lifetime of of issues, adult-related child abuse survivor issues that cost in the country and North America especially billions of dollars every year. So, and not only that, but these are people we're talking about. You do not want to leave a child in an abusive home. So, and the system's not perfect, but you could save a life. We could save a life by knowing what to look for, the signs and symptoms, and not allowing a child to stay in an abusive home. It's really bad. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about abuse. I'm not talking about, stuff that's not abuse, and we all know what I'm talking about. It's very important to know what to look for. And, I know that teachers and stuff and healthcare workers and stuff are generally trained, but just the regular public is not. And what would you do if a child came to you and told you that they were being abused? There's ways to report it. It's so important. So that's www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. Please check the website out. It's awesome. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be in tonight. I'll be back on tonight, 9:30 Mountain Standard Time for child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And I hope you have a great day. Take care, everybody, and remember to keep that hope alive and just keep going and keep searching out your healing and keep walking through every day. It's a daily walk. I know that, and so my heart's with you. And just keep on walking towards that hope and that that positive life that you deserve. Right. So take care, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.